I'm Kate Giles from the Department of Archaeology, and today I'm going to speak to you about my research on revelation, restoration and renewal, the remarkable history of Pickering's parish church wall paintings. The thousands of tourists who flock to Pickering in North Yorkshire each year are usually drawn to its steam railway, transporting them across the moors to Goathland Station, heartbeat country for a certain generation, Hogsmeade for another. Today, however, I want to encourage you to make a different kind of pilgrimage to Pickering, to climb the steps of its parish church and push hard against its ancient door to reveal a glimpse of one of the most remarkable schemes of medieval wall paintings in the country. What are these paintings? Who created them? And how have they survived centuries of change and restoration? And why does researching the cultural heritage on our doorstep matter to the University of York? Let us start by peeling back the layers of history to August 1852, when Pickering Church looked something like this. During restoration works, plaster was dislodged, and the glimpses of images beneath led to the enthusiastic revelation of a series of what was quickly recognised to be a nationally significant scheme of 15th century wall paintings. Antiquarians and artists from York and London hurried to Pickering. Papers were read and drawings exhibited. The local press and most of the parishioners wanted the paintings preserved. But this desire was not shared by the Reverend John Ponsonby, as a remarkable survival of correspondence with the Archbishop of York, Thomas Musgrave, attests. Why was Ponsonby so worried about the paintings? In 1850, there had been a short-lived and disproportionate reaction to what was termed the papal aggression, an attempt by the Catholic Church to reinstate its clerical hierarchy. National, public and political reactions were exacerbated locally by the missionary activity of Ampleforth College and the vibrancy of local nonconformism. But Ponsonby's letters also express a concern that the fondness for all things medieval being expressed within the Church of England by the Oxford movement and the Cambridge Ecclesiological Society looked suspiciously like an attempt to overturn the Reformation and reinstate the ways of the old religion. The Archbishop, however, did not agree. As patron of the Yorkshire Architectural Society, he was sympathetic to the preservation of such relics of antiquity. But his advice, that Ponsonby refrain from meddling until the paintings had been recorded, gave the vicar the excuse he needed. As soon as they had been drawn, this surviving set of drawings in the church are those made originally for the Scarborough Archaeological Society. He ordered them to be plastered over. This was an action repeated across hundreds of English churches in the 19th century, which led to the large-scale loss of much of our native medieval ecclesiastical art. It was not until 1880 that the paintings came to light once more, following a 10-year programme of restoration of the church and the paintings by the Reverend George Herbert Lightfoot and the artist Edward Holmes Jewett of the Lancaster firm Shrigley and Hunt. To the local community, Lightfoot was a hero who restored both the church and its congregation, creating the architectural and artistic legacy of the church today. The national antiquarian societies were less kind, however, about Jewett's rather pre-Raphaelite repainting, seen here particularly in the lower sections of the St Edmund's scene, which was perceived to have destroyed their authenticity. Worse still, the coating of beeswax and turpentine deployed to preserve the paintings actually prevented them from breathing and attracted surface dirt and dust, which led to the rapid deterioration in their condition and appearance. Throughout the 20th century, the leading scholars of wall paintings were drawn to Pickering to study, clean and conserve the paintings. Work was undertaken by Professor Ernest William Tristram of the Royal College of Art in 1931, and in 1951 by his student Clive Rouse and his assistant Janet Lenton, whose drawings you see here, following damage caused to the paintings in the winter of 1947. Rouse was forced to repaint almost the entirety of images such as St. Christopher, but justified his actions on the grounds that the figure was, in any case, merely a Victorian restoration. And this perception of Pickering's paintings as largely a Victorian scheme persists today in the verdict of the great art historian Sir Nicholas Pevsner. Pevsner noted, however, that this was mitigated by the fact that the 15th century scheme had probably never been great art, a commonly held view of late medieval wall paintings, which were perceived to lack the artistic skill and iconographic coherence of earlier centuries. Yet as an archaeologist, I want to challenge at least some of these ideas, peeling back another layer of history to explore their medieval meanings. The north wall of the church is occupied by a series of male saints. At the west end are St. George and Christopher. They are followed by a cartoon depicting St. John the Baptist remonstrating with Herod and Salome presenting the saint's head on a charger. Further east is St. Edmund being shot with arrows, and above him Thomas Becket, standing in Canterbury Cathedral as his knightly assassins draw their swords behind him. These martyred saints presented Pickering's parishioners with every possible model of masculine piety and intercession, from the soldier George to the ascetic John, clerical Thomas and aristocratic Edmund. The juxtaposition of Edmund and Becket may also have been deliberate. They were the devotional favourites of Henry VI and Edward IV respectively, and their selection may reflect Pickering's divided loyalties to the Duchy of Lancaster as well as the House of York in the 1470s, when we now think the scheme was created. The south wall, in contrast, offered models of female piety, the knowledgeable Christian Catherine and the Virgin herself, whose funeral and assumption in the clerestory culminated in her coronation on the north wall. These images reflected the influence of the guild dedicated to Our Lady, recorded in one of the few surviving late medieval wills for Pickering, and active right up to 1546, when it was recorded by Edward VI's commissioners. Below the images of the Virgin were the corporal acts of mercy and the Passion of Christ in cartoon form. Both of these would be subjects that parishioners would be expected to recognise and be tested on in their annual Lenten catechisms, for example. In many ways, Pickering's paintings therefore seem to reinforce scholarly perceptions that late medieval wall paintings were little more than compendia of popular saints and moralities, designed by committees as a poor man's Bible for the rural illiterate. And yet my research suggests that Pickering's paintings speak of a literate laity and their clergy, who probably owned copies of books like The Golden Legend or Merck's Festial, through which the stories of the saints were brought to life as the liturgical year rolled round, and wax candles and votive offerings were left beneath their painted images and statues in the church. And it is when we look more closely at the way in which the passing of liturgical time was marked at Pickering that a whole new layer of meaning emerges from its walls. For as you can see in this plan, the paintings of Pickering are arranged in calendrical order, commencing at the west end with images of the Passion and Crucifixion associated with the movable feast of Easter falling between March and April, set opposite those of George in April, giving way to Christopher in May, the funeral, Assumption and coronation of the Virgin in August, set above St. John's martyrdom, also falling in August, leading at the east end to Edmund and Catherine in November and Thomas in December. Fragmentary images in the clerestory of St. Anne and St. Matthew in July and September also fit the scheme. However, we still don't know what lies behind the bays at the east and west end of the church, which are covered in current layers of plaster, not explored in the 19th century. What does this sequence tell us about the ways in which the scheme was designed? Did its patrons or its painters simply flick through a copy of a legendary or sermon exemplar, designing by accident a scheme set in the calendrical order by which these texts were organised? Or was there something more deliberate here? A desire to structure their community's festival time and devotional activity across the great mural canvas and architectural space of their parish church? Perhaps, as Pamela Tudor Craig suggests, we will never truly know. But what I hope I have done today is to suggest that through our research, we can try to peel back those layers of history and see that notwithstanding, and indeed only because of the restorations of the 19th century, something of the meaning of Pickering's medieval paintings has been preserved. And as far as we know, in this Pickering appears to be unique. I want to end this afternoon's talk then by emphasising the significance of Pickering's paintings today. 2020 has shown us just how valuable places like Pickering are. Visitors speak of the way in which Pickering is a place of solace, respite, and beauty, an inspiration to those of faith, but also those of none. These places anchor us to the past and are a reminder of the richness of our local cultural heritage and its resilience over millennia. Today, the paintings are again in urgent need of further conservation. And for me, this has been an important aspect of York's commitment to be a university for public good, working with the former vicar, the Reverend Anthony Pritchett, the PCC and local community to tell their story, the subject of my forthcoming book, and to find funding to preserve the paintings for the next generation. I will end then with a quotation from another North Yorkshire creation, the wonderful novel by J.L. Carr, which tells the story of the conservation of a scheme of late medieval wall paintings by a shell-shocked soldier in the fictional North Yorkshire church of Osgerby. It captures perfectly what I want to convey this afternoon, our shared passion for the past and its value to the future. And I hope that you too will make a pilgrimage to Pickering, open the door and understand. Thank you.